我是 Mikhala， 我中文名字叫季明娜，季节的季，明天的明，女字旁加那个的那。When I first came, I had no idea. I thought Taiwan was Thailand. You know, if I had to choose, I would pick a different language to be like my mother tongue. It wouldn't be English.
What would it be?
It would probably be German.
German?
Yes.
So when you hear the German version of Butterfly, you're like, whoa, what is that thing?
I love going to the library, and so I would go and just find books, and I would find like little count to 10 in Swahili, and so I would find it and I would learn it, and then I would just go find someone who I thought spoke that language, and I'm like, hey, can I come and like count to
10 for you?
So I would do it, and they're just like, wow, just like, yes. I learned Korean from Dora, but not Spanish.
What?
Yeah.
There's a Korean Dora out there? Where there is?
When I have my own kids, I will speak another language to them because he didn't grow up. We did not grow up
with him speaking
Spanish.
Hello, welcome back to FUNDAY Chat. I'm your host, Wade, and today we have a special guest. Her name is Mikhala. She has been in Taiwan for around 4 years, but overall 5 years, going on 5 years. She is studying her master's in teaching Chinese as a foreign language. And this is her 4th year. She's actually at Tsinghua University. And so she will be finishing up soon. What she also teaches here in Taiwan is Spanish and English at Kangchao. And she is from Ohio, which is actually where I'm also from. Well, technically I studied there.
Yeah.
And so you studied Chinese and Spanish. And now you are here in Taiwan.
Yes.
So welcome, Mikhala, to FUNDAY Chat.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Just to start us off, I mean, I mentioned a lot of things, and today I invited you because I knew that when we first kind of got connected and we were chatting, that you mentioned like you spoke Mandarin and all these other languages, and I was like, wow, very talented. And so I was curious, like, what was your backstory and stuff? But you've been here now for a little while.
Yeah.
Could you maybe, because I asked you earlier, like, what's your Chinese level, how fluent you are? And I don't think we've had a conversation necessarily in Mandarin, but do you mind just like doing a little self-introduction in Chinese first?
Yeah, okay. Hi, 大家好，我是 Mikhala， 我中文名字叫季明娜，季节的季，明天的明，女字旁加那个的那。我现在在清华大学读中文系，然后我很高兴可以在这里跟大家聊天，所以谢谢，拜拜。
Wow. Okay, your Mandarin actually that was really good. Even your pronunciation is like quite good.
Thank you.
So like, can you like give me some backstory? Like, how did you encounter Mandarin? How did you encounter, I guess, like learning language just in general? And what's your journey?
Oh, okay. So it all began way back when, little elementary schooler Mikhala.
Okay.
Language has so my dad's from Panama, actually. Okay. And so, he would always say stuff like, ven a comer, like, come eat, or no lo toques, like, don't touch that, like hot stuff, don't touch it. Okay. And then he'd have like salsa playing in the background all the time. And so that was always there. And I just remember I loved going to the library. And so I would go and just find books, and I would find like little count to 10 in Swahili. And so I would find it and I would learn it. And then I would just go find someone who I thought spoke that language. And I'm like, hey, can I come and like count to 10
for you?
So I would do it, and they're just like, wow, just like, yes, power up. Language has just been there all the time. And I just loved hearing the different sounds. And so with Chinese particularly, I was reflecting on it when I was like preparing for this chat, and I was just like, wow, Chinese has like always been there, kind of like dormant.
Okay.
Yeah, because growing up, I was really into martial arts.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did you do some?
I did for a while, but I got pulled out because my grades weren't good. So.
Okay.
I think that was an excuse. But
that's kind of like an Asian parent thing that they would do.
Yeah. I gotta ask my dad about that. He's the one that pulled me. But and so we would have like books, like stacks of books in our house. And there was like these random books about like Chinese kids and like kids who were martial artists and stuff like that.
Wow, okay.
And then in one of the books, it had like moves, like how to do certain moves.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I would see these things and just like, wow, that's cool. And, you know, I try it out. And then we watched a bunch of movies. So like Bruce Lee and then Jackie Chan, all his animated series, all his, all that stuff. And then in American television, like the cartoons, you have like Samurai Jack and like it's just, it's all there. I would just like let it, I don't know, I just really loved it. And I was like, I want to be a spy, ninja, like undercover agent who knows karate and who can do all these flips. But what I remember the most is, so like we have mugs here. In our house, we had these mugs that were very, it's like porcelain. They're like these porcelain mugs. And I remember that each one had like Chinese characters on them. And at the time, I didn't know what they said or anything, but I looked at them so often. I remember that on one of them, it was "wu."
Oh.
Yeah. So
you remember the character and like you didn't know what it was, but now
I know what it is.
Okay.
Like, wow. Interesting. Yeah. But those are like the fancy mugs to me. So anytime I made tea, I was just like, I gotta have my mug, you know. And I would just touch because it was really intricate, the designs and stuff.
Was it like those tea type mugs, or like?
It was like a
regular mug.
It was a regular mug with just like a Chinese flair. Yeah. And so I just remember that we would have things like that around the house. And I was just like, wow, this is so pretty, it's so beautiful. And it wasn't until, you know, later on when I actually started studying languages that I was like, I eventually came back to Chinese. So I'll talk about it later. But language has always been, like, I remember I have a twin brother. Okay. And so we would make up languages too. Like, I would just speak complete gibberish, and then he would like go along with it.
But would you guys understand each other, or you just okay?
We just talk.
Okay. So, people are like, wow, look at these like these kids making up their language. Yeah.
So I've always just loved the sounds, and I don't know, it's just kind of powerful being able to say something that other people understood but others could not.
Yes, I understand that feeling.
You know, so so.
To maybe clarify, how many languages do you actually speak?
Okay, so I speak English. That's my native language.
Yes.
Then I speak Spanish.
Spanish, yeah, you
Spanish, Chinese, and then German. It was better before, but now I
haven't had the chance to practice.
Not much, but those four are the main.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And so your first language would have been English?
English, yeah.
Okay. And then you encountered Spanish during school, I'm assuming?
I actually encountered German first, and that was in school. Oh. When I was living in Germany for 3 years.
Okay. You guys traveled around, right?
Yeah, for the military.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. And so I took, 2 years of German? Then we moved back to the States, and they didn't have German class. So I was like, well, I guess I'm Panamanian. Might as well take Spanish.
Yeah. So did your dad speak Spanish at home? Because you said he's from Panama, right?
No, and that's the thing. That's why I'm so, when I have my own kids, I will speak another language to them, because he didn't grow up. Oh. We did not grow up
with him speaking
Spanish. And because he left Panama when he was 12 years old, I believe. And he speaks Spanish, but I found out that that's actually not his native tongue, because it's English. Oh. Because, so with Panama, you know the canal?
Yes.
And how they had people coming to build the canal?
Right.
Okay, and there was like a American presence there, so there was a base there at the time.
I see.
And so there's the railroad tracks. And so on one side, that's like the Hispanic side, and the other side, that's English side. He happened to be born on the English side.
I see.
Yes.
Wow.
But living there, you have to, you have to. So he did.
Okay.
But because I think he left so early, he did not have a chance. Those are your formative years.
Yes, absolutely.
And so he didn't have a chance to really grow up in that culture.
I see.
And so by the time he had his own kids, it was just like
English was what he was comfortable with.
Yes. And you know, his accent will kind of flare up sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. Do you guys make fun of your dad?
Not to his face.
Okay.
Yeah. But so he didn't grow up. We didn't grow up with Spanish. He would just say certain things.
Yes.
And then he would put on, we had a VCR, VHS player in the van that we used to drive around in. So he would put in a Spanish tape for us to listen to, and we would learn like rápido, you know, those kinds of things. It's just like, but he didn't speak to us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I had to learn on my own.
You learned from Dora the Explorer then, right?
No.
No?
No.
No, sorry, Dora.
No. I learned Korean from Dora, but not Spanish.
What?
Yeah.
There's a Korean Dora out there? Wait, there is? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, you live and you learn.
Yeah. So I went and I learned Spanish from a teacher who's from Spain.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So I learned from her.
Again, I speak Mandarin and English, I'd say fluently. And I myself see a personality shift speaking either language.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, like for you, having learned these language, do you feel that same shift happening in these different languages?
Definitely. But I think it's a different shift than maybe what you're describing.
Okay.
Because for me, when I learned, I felt like I came into myself in other languages. So
Interesting.
yeah. So
It's expressing different versions of you, or like you're discovering
Kind of.
different versions of yourself?
I'm discovering different versions of me through these languages.
Wow.
Yes. So
what kind of Mikhala do we get when you're speaking English?
crazy.
The crazy Mikhala?
I don't even know. Like, I have no idea. But yeah, I feel like English, if I had to choose, I would pick a different language to be like my mother tongue. It wouldn't be English.
What would it be?
It would probably be German.
German.
Yes.
Why is that? Was that like your formative years, you think?
That was
when
my
you-
formative years when I was learning German. But every time that I hear German, people say it sounds really harsh and, you know.
I mean, so what's the word for butterfly in German?
Butterfly. Ooh, I don't know. I forgot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I just remember seeing like this reel and it's like all the different versions of like English, it's butterfly, right?
Yeah,
It
yeah,
sounds
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah, yeah,
and then
yeah,
like
yeah.
maybe, do you know Spanish?
Spanish, mariposa.
Okay, see, that sounds
Mariposa,
beautiful.
yeah.
Mariposa. And then we'll have to have the guests look it up. I mean, the audience to look it up
Yeah.
themselves. But when you hear the German version of butterfly, you're like, whoa, what is that thing?
Whoa, yeah.
But
No.
no, it is associated with a harsh thing. But it is interesting. People who speak it, I think, find it to be not so.
No. And I think like it feels like home.
Okay.
When I hear German, it's very comforting and I'm just like, it sounds so nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what about with Spanish? What version of you do you?
With Spanish, I feel like I'm more outgoing.
Okay.
I'm very outgoing when I'm speaking Spanish and I'm just like, yeah, you know, everything's fine.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's
I think
very
that's the
open.
vibe though, right? With
Yes.
like the Latins and like with the Spanish, it's very expressive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Now what about the Mandarin?
Mandarin, it depends on who I'm talking to.
Okay.
Because you have, like in Taiwan, you have the Han Chinese, but
Yes.
you have the Aboriginal, 原住民.
Yeah.
And so when I'm speaking, I find that I'm more open when I'm speaking with 原住民. And it's they're just so fun. Like,
Yeah.
I love talking to them. And
Yeah.
it's just like I was actually kind of like adopted into a family.
Oh, really?
One time. Yeah, Naomi.
Do you know what Zhu they're from?
Yeah, Amezu.
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 Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Wow.
And so I went and they gave me a name. My name is Panay.
Okay.
Yeah, in their
Wow.
language. And
Very
it means
cool.
like sweet rice or something like that. But
Okay.
they say it's very beautiful and I trust
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
But when I'm speaking in Chinese, a lot of times it's very like,
Prim and proper, you think?
yeah, like I feel kind of enclosed, but I have a pass because I'm a foreigner, so I can just do whatever I want.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's just like, oh, you know.
Yeah, she foreigner.
Yeah, I'm just like, yeah. So, but with Yuan Min, it's very open.
Yes.
And I feel really free. And
Yeah.
yeah, you know how African Americans in the States, like we have taken in any culture, when you have like Africans in the culture, they take that language and they do things with it.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
just
yeah.
like,
Add a little twist.
yeah, a little like flair
Yeah,
and stuff. Like
yeah.
with Spanish is the same, and
Okay.
Even Chinese, you have a lot of people like YouTubers and stuff who
Yes.
speak in Mandarin, and
Yeah.
the way that they speak is
Yes.
just like, oh, it's really fun.
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
That's so true.
Yeah, and so yeah, I think with Chinese, that's what I'm exploring right now. What can I do with Chinese? Because I did not grow up in this culture.
Yes.
And so I feel like because I have an international mindset, it's like, okay, how can I fit inside this language? Because Chinese is very homogenous. Like the
Yes.
culture around it is very homogenous.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to find your identity in it, kind of.
Yeah, I hear
And
you.
so that's because you asked me like 2 years ago, that first time we were talked, I said I don't really like Chinese, and you were like, what has to happen for you to like it? And I was like, I don't know.
Wow. And 2 years later, how do you feel?
2 years later, I'm still
Still on the
figuring that
journey?
out.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
but it really depends on who I'm with.
Yeah.
And so with Yuan Min, I really am able to like open up and just have fun. And it's just, everything is a joke and
Yeah,
everything. And so there's no, you know, if I say a tone wrong, they're just like, you said that wrong. I'm just like, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
It's really fun. So.
Yeah, you know what? This is also just, I think it's making me realize, and it's touching a lot of points that I can quite identify with, because as much as like I'm half Taiwanese, but because I'm also mixed, I'm not quite fully maybe accepted in some regard or some spaces. And I think I definitely, when it comes to the personality shifting aspect, I totally get that. And I think because in my formative years, I was here in Taiwan. So when I had come back, you know, a couple of years back and living here, I have come into my own person, but in the English version of me. And I sense that when I speak Mandarin, I go back to the 12-year-old version. And the 12-year-old version is the kid that grew up in this culture, knowing that you have to respect. You always, you don't overstep. You don't say anything disrespectful to an elder. You almost don't go against the order. Right? Things are already set in place. You respect what's there. Whereas in the Western mindset, people are more individualistic. So they're like, hey, even though I'm younger, I might know some stuff, you know? And in the same way for you, I'm also trying to navigate, like, what does that self look like when I'm trying to like enter the space? Because in the other regard, language also comes with its culture. And understanding the culture makes the bigger difference. I mean, anyone can learn a language, but to really understand what the culture is, how people perceive certain things, and which I think to your depth, I can sense that you have that because of the way that you have to study the language, right? It informs a lot of things. So it's so interesting to have to navigate, like, where do I belong? Like, do you see me as one of you when I'm speaking the language, or am I a foreigner who speaks the language? And, you know, do I fully become part of you, or am I never accepted?
Right.
And it's interesting to hear that. I think even from the Yuan Zuming culture, it's more sort of open and like friendly in a way. So that's interesting that you find a commonality there. That's very interesting when you say you go back to your 12-year-old self when you speak Chinese, and that you're in Taiwan, but you feel like you came into yourself in English, not so much in Chinese. And I feel like with all of these languages, so for me, when you learn a language to communicate. Right? Okay. And you can't learn a language in isolation. Like, you can, but to really understand the language, understand the culture, how it's used,
the nuances, you have to be in community.
Absolutely.
And you asked me, what are the different ways that I express myself in these different languages? And something that's very unique to my experience learning language is, so I'm multicultural too, you know, like I'm American, but I'm also Latina and whatever else, you know, mixed, you know, back there, you know. But what's interesting is that I don't really feel like American. Like, people see me as American, but I feel very... And
you were born and you grew up there, right? Okay.
Yeah, but I'm just like, what is this? You know, what is this? Because we were so transient growing up. At every stage, we were somewhere different. So, elementary school, we were in Kentucky. Middle school, we were in Germany. High school, we were in Washington State. And then college, I was in Columbus. And now I'm in Taiwan. And it's just like, dang. So when people say, like, where are you from? I'm just like, Columbus. Because I'm just like,
it's like, you usually have to draw up a whole map. And like, this is
too much work. And so, but learning languages was my way, because I didn't really know what my identity was. So my dad is Panamanian, but he didn't really give that to us.
Pass that down,
He didn't pass that down. So to say that I was Panamanian but not have the language, I felt like an imposter, so I didn't say it. I was just like, yeah, my dad's American, you know?
Wow, okay.
And so when I learned a language, it was my way of figuring out who I was. So when I learned German, I was just like, because I was uprooted, you know, as a child. I was just like, dang, I'm like the only black girl in this sea of, you know, non-black people, and I don't speak the language, and you know, and so I'm trying to figure myself out, and then German was my way of doing that. But then we go and move.
Yeah.
And now it's Spanish. I'm like, I'm Panamanian, so I need to find my roots. You know? And so I'm trying to learn this stuff, but I'm not learning from my dad who's from Panama. I'm learning from this woman from Spain. And so I start picking up that the Theo, like the
yes,
lisp
they pronounce
and
it different.
Yeah, and my dad made fun of me, so I stopped that. And a lot of stuff. But yeah, and so learning language was my way of figuring out who I was. But I feel like I'm still like, okay, who exactly am I? Because it's like pieces of me. And when I learn a language, I do it like all the way. I go all in, and we're going to talk about that later, but I go all in. And so I'm just like, man, now I got to construct a new
version,
a new version, you know? So it's very, it's a lot going on out there, you know? But, yeah.
Well, see, that's such a deep way of recognizing like the, you know, how deep it goes when it comes to language. People think it's just like, oh, so I can speak and they can understand what I'm saying and I can ask where the bathroom is and stuff. But I think to the depth that you're describing, it's really getting into the roots of, you know, where these language come from and, you know, how do they actually apply and impact a country or like a people group. And so like you've touched on some of it, you know, like the different cultural differences, but I was wondering just from your perspective, what do you think is the biggest difference when it comes to like the Western, and language, even mindset and culture versus what you've experienced here in Asia?
Okay. In terms of learning languages in the States, that's probably shifted, you know, since I've been there. But growing up in the school system, learning language was not, it wasn't taken seriously.
Right. People have a second language. Like you don't you have to choose a second language?
You have to get the credits.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then it's kind of just like, all right.
Check
it's kind of like how people learn English here to a certain extent, I feel, maybe. But
it seems like people in Taiwan, once you leave, you have some kind of competency.
Where you feel like in the States you have zero? Like
no.
Okay.
None. Like that's probably changed, like I said. There's more like bilingual
emphasis
schools and stuff like that. But in the regular public school system, no.
Okay.
Because you only have to
just get a grade.
You just get a grade, and people, you know, sometimes don't even do that. You know? So at the end of the day, you can say like, hola. Burrito,
yeah.
You know,
I can order my food in Chipotle.
Yeah. So in the States, we don't value learning languages because why do I need to? Everybody comes here and you need to speak English. You know, so why?
Yeah.
You know?
That is a little bit of a mindset. Unfortunately, that has been kind of the complacency I feel like I've encountered with a lot of Americans when I did study there, because you know I would speak obviously English to them, but my English is South African English, which is actually British English. So certain words we pronounce it differently, right? Now, of course, I've adjusted over the years. However, like I remember speaking and them not understanding maybe a particular word, and they'd be like, "You're not speaking proper English," and I'm like, "Wow, okay, you guys clearly, this is your world, right? But the world is so much bigger." Yes. Okay, so that's what you encounter with the West. What do you think about here in Asia?
In Asia, I think you guys are much more open to it. And especially here in Taiwan, you can't help but learn these other languages because you have the Chinese here, but every day you mix with Taigi.
Yeah.
And then you have the Hakka. Hakka. And then you have all the Aboriginal languages, but also, you know, Korea and Japan. It's like a trend.
Yeah, like Asia is all part of it.
Yes. And so I feel like it's much more celebrated and accessible, maybe. But in the States, you're not necessarily going to. It's such a huge place. Yeah. And we'll see Mexicans or people from Latin America, but we don't necessarily have contact, the need, you know. And if you do make contacts, like, oh, cool, you know, you speak English?
Yeah.
You know? And so... Yeah, I think Asia, it's expected that you're going to, I think outside of the States, it's expected that you're going to speak another language.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's not just a West and East thing, because in Germany, they come out of school, they speak another language.
Yeah, I mean, European countries, I think the same, like it being so near to each other that they have that accessibility. And it seems like the States obviously has and I mean, it's so big. That's one thing I honestly didn't realize when I got to the States. it was like so big with the different states. And so English across the board, you get by. And so it seems like there isn't really a need because, what do you think is the most rewarding thing that you've gained from learning all these languages? And I think maybe more particularly here in Taiwan, since you studied literature, right? Chinese literature and Spanish, but learning that and then actually being in Asia, how have you seen that play out kind of in your day-to-day and life?
I think for me, I just really enjoy the language itself.
Yeah.
So just learning about how it was, not how it was created, but how it works.
Yeah.
And so there is actually a verse in the Bible in Corinthians where it talks about every language has its own unique meaning. And I love that verse because every language, I feel like it's a way to, it's a lens through which you can see the world, and how they describe things. It's unique to that place.
Yes.
And that language is unique to that region where it was like birthed.
Yeah.
English is, all over, But you even see it with English, how English in South Africa is not the same as English in Britain.
Exactly.
It's not the same as English in India. They take whatever is from that region and they insert it into that language.
Yeah.
So I love studying languages because it gives me a new way to talk about things and to think about things.
Yeah.
So, I think language in itself is rewarding for me.
Right. That's cool. So what about China? Like what about Mandarin in particular do you feel like is something that you've learned about, but being here, you've now experienced it and you can see it differently maybe?
The reason why I wanted to come to Taiwan was, yes, to study the language, but I actually wanted to come so that I could learn more about the Yuanzhumin.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Was that something that you were very curious about, like when you first came here?
When I first came, I had no idea.
Oh.
I thought Taiwan was Thailand. Like I had
Didn't
no
Miss
idea.
K do something like that as well?
That's a common mistake.
So many people come and they're like, welcome, wait, where am I? Wait, not Thailand? You're telling your family, they're like, hey, how's Thailand? You're like,
not where I am.
Very different.
Yeah, right, no.
Okay.
But when I came, the first time I met some Yuanzhumin, because I was in Tainan.
Okay.
And then I met some and I got into the music, and that's how I started studying Chinese, was through the music. And the music I was listening to, I found out that most of them were Yuanzhumin. And just, like the way that the type of music that they make, like the style, the way that they sing.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of similarities with how I was raised, like in the church, like
Yes,
the black church,
yes,
gospel.
yes.
There's a lot of similarities.
Yeah.
And so it just, I could draw to it. It drew me to it. And so when I was in the States, I was looking up just like what are these different tribes?
Yeah.
And, so when I came, I got to actually meet them. I was just like, wow, they're so loving. And the way that they speak Chinese is different.
Slightly different.
It's different. And so I guess if that answers the question.
Yeah. Well, so actually you mentioned the singing aspect and we will talk more about this in our next episode. So a little teaser for the audience. But to finish off here, I mean, speaking so many languages, I'm sure some people are looking and they're like, I'm just trying to get through one, Mandarin's a very hard one. And maybe they just want to learn English so that they can also travel and whatnot. But what is some of maybe your advice that you would give that's a good way to kind of approach the language learning journey?
Okay. So a lot of people ask, like, how fluent are you all the time?
Yes, like we did.
Yes, exactly. But they say, like, how fluent are you? I'm just like, that's very, you have to decide that for yourself. What does fluent look like for you?
Okay.
And a lot of times that's actions. What can you do with the language? Where can you go with it? Who can you talk to? And so when I'm learning a language, I think the way that I learn language has to shift, and it's experiencing a shift. Because in the beginning, it was complete immersion. So I would just take everything that I did in English and switch it over.
Wow.
Yeah, like from the get-go. Like my phone, the computer, everything was in Spanish.
So you just created that world. Wow. Okay.
But there are advantages and disadvantages to doing that. Because for me, yes, I learned at a faster rate, but I also closed myself off to people. And that's the whole reason why you learn a language.
Okay.
Is to talk to people.
Yes.
And so, yes, I was learning.
Wait, sorry, but what do you mean by that? Do you like, if you're learning Spanish, you're like, I'm not speaking to any English speaking people, or?
I took it to an extreme. So
Wait, really? Actually? Like an English person comes up to you like, sorry, I'm in my Spanish.
No hablo inglés.
Yeah, no hablo.
No, I was in high school at that time.
Okay.
And that's why it has to shift because I had the time and
Yes.
I could get away with doing that.
Okay.
I can't really do that.
Yeah. Imagine.
But
You're like,
yeah.
I'm in my English phase right now. No Mandarin, no Spanish,
Do
no
not talk
German.
to me if you do not speak this language. But no, at that time, so it was Spanish. And so I would just get all my books were in Spanish. All my music was in Spanish. If you didn't want to speak to me in Spanish, and I told my brothers and sisters, I was like, you guys can learn with me. If you don't want to learn, then
I'm going to have to let you go.
we're not going to be talking as much. Okay. And at one point, I even told them, I was like, I'm going to talk to my dad in Spanish and he'll translate what I have to say to you. I was very crazy.
Wow.
But that's the extent to what I was doing.
I see.
And then for Chinese, I couldn't do that anymore. I was in college. That would be weird.
Yeah. 不好意思，我现在只能讲中文。And you're like, what do you say?
What the heck?
Yeah.
No. So if you want to learn a language, for me, it's really hard to stick to that because I like learning so many. So do you have the time to do that? I think that's the best way, especially if you are not in that culture.
Yes.
Then you have to create that immersion, that bubble for yourself.
Yes.
So don't be afraid you have to get input. So get as much input as you can.
Yeah.
But also you need to have output at some point. So talk to people.
Yes.
Because if not, what happened with me is I learned a specific set of Spanish, but I wasn't learning, let's say, like slang, or I wasn't learning ways that people
So you
actually
sound
communicate.
too textbook.
Yes.
And they're like, nobody speaks like that.
Exactly. So make sure that you create that for yourself, but also find community.
Yeah.
You have to find people to speak with.
Yeah.
You know, and then rule of thumb, if you are in a group, make sure you find people that at least 3 of them speak the other language, because if not, they're going to switch over to English if they're comfortable in it.
Oh, yes.
I found that a lot with Chinese.
Yeah.
A lot of the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing all your insights and giving us all this backstory. And I honestly, I didn't know a lot of this as well, so it was interesting to hear. And I think it really shows that you do need to take, not necessarily to the extreme with every case, but you do need to put in that effort.
Yeah.
And I think another important thing is to make sure not only the input, although you need a lot of that, the output is one of the biggest thing I think for Taiwanese people that we struggle with.
Yes.
The fear of like, oh, they'll judge me, like 没有面子, like all these, and again that ties to the cultural aspect. So in some ways, it's interesting how we have to try to like overcome those barriers. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of that. And like I said, the next episode with Mikhala here, we're going to talk about her passion when it comes to singing. And so I hope you've learned and have some things to take away from this, because I think language learning is part of our journey. It's part of our identity. And so it's a great way to connect with people. So thank you so much once again. And we will see everyone on the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye.